Hi, Doug Davidoff here, founder and CEO at Imagine Business Development. Want to welcome you all this afternoon. Appreciate you setting some time aside in your calendar to hear what we have to say about getting 2012 off to a fast start. The objective today is to have a fast-paced webinar. We're going to spend about the next 40-45 minutes together. We'll save some time at the end of the program for any questions and answers that you may have. So at the end, you'll be able to raise your hand through the control panel and to ask whatever questions that you have. Over the last 20 years, we've worked with more than about 5,000 salespeople firsthand, and we've been able to see what is it that they really do versus what is it that they say that they do. The other thing that we've been able to take a look at is why is there what seems to be an elite group of salespeople that earn more money than typical salespeople, achieve far greater results than the average salesperson, and if you're ever in that average category looking out at the successful salespeople, it always looks like those really successful salespeople, well, frankly, they're not putting as much effort out, or at least it doesn't look like they're putting as much effort out. And over the last 20 years, what we've done is really studied what are the critical few things that the great salespeople do that the average salespeople don't do as much of or don't pay attention to. And what we want to do today is share with you the 5 secrets that we've learned that when you apply it to your business life, when you apply it to what it is that you're doing, you're able to see your sales results take off. It starts off with what we refer to as the myth of time or the myth of the year. And one of the things that great salespeople understand is they have very limited time. When they talk about achieving their goals for the year, they understand they don't really have the entire year to achieve their goals. The first thing that they do is they realize that whether they're working or their customers aren't working, once you take out the weekends and holidays to enjoy some family time, some personal time to recuperate, take a few weeks of vacation, and then when you consider all of the time that's spent on non-direct sales activities, all the time that you have to prepare to make sales, handle paperwork, deal with company issues, etc., studies show that even the most productive salespeople lose 1/3 to 1/2 of their time on non-direct sales activities. Even if you're focused completely on new business development and you're among the most productive people out there, you lose 1/3 of your time to non-sales activities. And when you add it all together, at best, you have about 40% of your year to get things done. You really have to have focus. You really have to allocate your time judiciously to make sure that you're doing the critical actions that need to be done. But in today's super competitive, complex times, frankly, it feels like we're drinking from a fire hose half the time. Managing opportunities, dealing with client issues, dealing with our boss, dealing with our families, etc. There's just so much to do and nowhere near enough time to do it. And what we've learned is that multitasking just doesn't cut it anymore. Yeah, we have to do it to a degree, but if we're relying on multitasking, what we're going to find is we're going to fall in the trap that I like to call the whirlwind, where the daily activities and managing the minutia of every day just takes over our jobs and takes over our lives. And in today's world, where the clock is always ticking, we have to find ways to break through. We have to find ways to take that 40% of productive time that we have available to us and leverage it to make it tremendously productive. Here is the key insight that great salespeople understand and great business people understand. It's all about energy management. How do you manage energy? It's like the sun. The sun is probably the most powerful source of energy that we know of, and it does tremendous things, don't get me wrong. It allows an entire planet to survive and in many ways to thrive. But in and of itself, it doesn't really do anything. The energy is so fractured, it doesn't get anywhere. But if you apply focus to that energy, if you identify what are the critical places where you need to apply that energy, if you stop applying that energy to activities that are not high productive activities, you're able to blow things up. You're able to move forward at a faster rate than you ever thought possible. Now, I'll tell you, here's the biggest challenge with focus. It's boring. The biggest challenge is that most salespeople like to do lots of things. Most business people like the variance of life. Let's face it, you can't really survive in business, certainly on the sales side of business, if you don't enjoy people to some degree or other. And every day coming in, doing the same thing, identifying the critical few actions that you need to take, not doing the things that aren't as important, well, oftentimes that sounds a little bit like life fit for an accountant, not necessarily for a salesperson. But the key is, if you can identify the objective that you want to achieve, establish the critical results that are out there, you can achieve far more in less time, frankly, giving you a lot more time to do the things that you really enjoy to do, to make more money, to gain more clients, and to deliver significantly greater results. But look, here's the enemy. This is the enemy that every single business person and every single salesperson deals with every day. It's called the path of least resistance. What the path of least resistance says is, left to our own devices, we're going to do the thing that gets the most noise. We're going to take the next step that's the easiest. It's why when a child gets lost in the mountains, you always search at the bottom of the mountain, not the top of the mountain, because the path of least resistance will take you down the mountain. The challenge is we want to climb mountains. We want to break free from the gravity that's holding us down to less than great results, less than the results that we want to achieve. And to be able to break through that path of least resistance, we have to be extraordinarily clear on our objectives. We have to know what is the result, what is the single result that we want to achieve. So here's my first question to you, and I'd like you to take a minute and think about this and jot some ideas down. 1 year from now, if we were sitting here having this conversation 1 year from now, and you were looking back over the last year, what is the single result that you would want to be able to point to be able to say you had a great year? Take a moment and think about it. Jot down a few ideas. But what I really want you to do is identify what is the single result you want to be able to have achieved 1 year from now. Have you written it down? Let's talk now about 5 simple approaches that the great ones use that the average ones don't. Now, whenever I share or discuss these 5 insights that I'm going to share with you, let me share the response that I get, not from the words of the average salespeople, but from the actions of the average salespeople or average business people. The average salespeople will see these 5 ideas They'll think about them, and 3 months later, they won't be utilizing them. Regardless of how many salespeople that I show that utilize it, regardless of how many salespeople demonstrate that ability to use it, they just don't. Why? Well, when I share these ideas, the thought that many of you might have is these ideas are simply too simple. What's the real secret? What's the real thing? Here's my promise. Take the 5 ideas that I'm about to share with you. Apply them to your sales year. And I guarantee you, you will see your sales results grow significantly. 30 to 50% better results at the same or less effort. Apply these 5 critical ideas maniacally, and you'll see the results. I call them the critical 5. Let's talk about them. I'm going to share the 5 first, and then I'm going to break down each one in a little bit more depth. The first thing is that great salespeople are maniacally clear on who they're trying to attract. They're maniacally clear on what we call their who, and they're clear on their why. And what that means is that a great salesperson knows who their customer is, and they know who their customer isn't. They never confuse the two. They don't get lost trying to convince people who shouldn't be buying from them, who shouldn't be their fans. They never get lost trying to convince them. They're also remarkably clear on why they want to talk to somebody. They not only firmly believe what their product and service can do for their customers, they're clear on the why. They can easily and quickly communicate why it's important that someone be working with them. The second thing that they do is they segment their clients and they segment their time. They're firm believers in what I call the power of flow. Most salespeople jump around from activity to activity. They make a prospecting call, they make a follow-up call, they call an existing customer, they deal some paperwork. What you'll find is that great salespeople segment their time and they segment their clients. The third thing is you'll always know when you're talking to a great salesperson because they don't sound like everybody else. And as I talked about earlier, their message is clear. They're very clear. They're very concise. They know what they want to do. They know what they want to say. They know who to say it to. And they don't waste people's time. They get deep quickly. They don't get lost in small talk. Now, don't get me wrong. They're very social people very often. They're extraordinarily good at making connections. They're strong relationship builders. But they don't sound like every other salesperson. The fourth thing is they measure and track religiously. And they manage what they measure and track. And as I'll talk about in a few minutes, they don't measure and track everything. That's a myth. Great ones don't measure everything. They don't track everything. They measure and track what's important, and then they manage their future actions based upon that tracking. Take a look at any great athlete, take a look at any great performer, and you'll find that they measure and track religiously. And the fifth thing is they know that even if they're in the field by themselves, even if they're a one-man team, they know that winning isn't a one-person game. And they're extraordinarily good at utilizing the resources that are out there to help them achieve their goals and their objectives. Let's talk about each one of these in a little bit more depth. Great salespeople are maniacally clear on who they're trying to attract. There's an old saying, seek and you will find. But here's the challenge with that saying. If you're not clear on what you're seeking, you'll struggle to find it. When you're extraordinarily clear on what it is you're looking for, you'll find it and they'll find you. I call it the blue Lexus effect. How many of you noticed a blue Lexus on your way to work today? What if you had just bought a blue Lexus? My bet is you would have noticed an awful lot of blue Lexus. It's called selective perception. We see what we train our mind and our eyes to see. And further, great salespeople aren't only clear on what they're looking for, they're extraordinarily clear on what their customer is looking for. They understand their customers at an extraordinarily deep level. They understand their customers better than their customers understand themselves. They're highly empathetic. They're very tuned in. What are their customers thinking and feeling? What are they seeing? What are they saying and doing? And what are they hearing? They realize that people don't buy for our reasons, they buy for their reasons. And they know that it's their job, it's the salesperson's job to think like the customer, not the customer's job to think like the salesperson. When you're extraordinarily clear who you're looking for, you'll find you'll be able to make those connections 5 times faster. This next point is especially important if you're involved in a sale to organizations or if you're involved in a sale to other businesses. Average salespeople tend to identify one point of contact. They try to find a single point of entry. Great salespeople go deep and they go wide. I want to share with you a tool that you can use. We call it the 3x3 matrix. If you make it a goal that every time you go in to a customer situation before you make a recommendation, your goal is to have identified 3 different people in 3 different areas or 3 different levels of a company, and you've identified 3 important issues that relate to each of those 3 people, you'll find that you'll succeed in your sales 80–90% of the time. And anything below 7 to 9 issues begins to drastically reduce the likelihood of success. You know, the challenge in today's times is there's so much more pressure on buyers today. There's so many things that they want to do. They're operating at such a lack of resources today that more and more times they're ending a buying process by not making a decision. As a matter of fact, a survey of the Global 2000 purchasing managers demonstrated that 40% of Global 2000 purchasing processes are ending in no decision. And the reason for that is that the sales side of the house is not making a business case strong enough or deep enough to justify the investment of time, money, and energy. And as a result, companies are deciding to do nothing so that they still have resources available should something else come along that they want to do. It's more important than ever that you don't wait for objections to put your strongest business case across. Go deep and go wide. Spend a little bit more time up front, and what you'll see is that the results that you get will increase significantly, and it'll actually take less time for you to be able to achieve those results. Here's the second thing that they do. They understand the power of flow. Most salespeople, just on the sales side, have 2 conflicting activities that need to take place. They have to go out and get new business, and they have to maintain their existing business. Now, I realize on the surface that might not sound conflicting, but the reality is it is. Maintaining business is highly urgent. When a customer calls and wants something, we have to respond quickly. There's an urgency to it. Most new business activities are very important, but they're not necessarily urgent. And that means they oftentimes don't get done because we had to deal with urgency. Great salespeople always make sure they've got the proper amount of time allocated to the important activities. Here's a way to take a look at your here's a way to take a look at your clients and your opportunities. to be able to segment them so that you can manage your time more effectively. Break your clients into a 2x2 grid. The upper left corner, what we refer to as quadrant 1, represents customers that have a high potential for growth, so there's lots of new business opportunity, and they're really good existing customers. These are the customers that we love because we're getting business from them and we have a tremendous opportunity to grow business. The upper right quadrant, quadrant 2, represents low potential for growth but high current value. Now these are great customers because we have all of their business. We have everything that we're going to get from them. Our job here is just to maintain and manage that business. Keep them happy. Quadrant 3 represent high potential opportunities, so lots of growth with low to or no current value. These are your prospects. And quadrant 4, we shouldn't be spending very much time with. When you can look at each one of your opportunities and classify them as quadrant 1, quadrant 2, or quadrant 3, eliminating quadrant 4, we can then allocate our time and allocate our calendar to support these activities. We obviously have to make sure that we're maintaining quadrant 1 and quadrant 2 accounts, and we can allocate time effectively to do that. And we have to make sure that we're focusing on growth for the quadrant 1 and quadrant 3 accounts. We group our activities together, we can set clear goals, and then we can get into the flow. So when we get on a new business focus, we allocate a day focused on just new business. We allocate 4 hours focused on just new business issues. Then we allocate a day or several hours to deal with maintenance issues. And what you'll find is the efficiency and the effectiveness that you gain will be like freeing up a day a week. Think about that. What would an extra day a week do to your productivity? How much more business could you gain? How much more business could you manage with an extra day a week? Allocate your time effectively, you'll see that extra day a week. When you meet a great salesperson, you know it. They don't look, they don't act, they don't feel like every other salesperson. And here's the thing that I found most fascinating about really good salespeople. They get to business quickly. Great salespeople are provocative. They don't start off with small talk. They're not features, benefits, spewers. They're not peddling their wares. They understand who their customer is. They understand the issues that their customers have. And as a result of that, they're quite provocative. Now, what does provocative mean? It doesn't mean they're Howard Stern-like. As a matter of fact, most great salespeople are far more interested than they are interesting. What provocative means is they wake people up. They change how people are thinking about things. They don't talk about themselves. They talk about their customers. So rather than saying we help companies achieve great results, because of their deep understanding of who their customers are, they're far more likely to say something along the lines of, we work with companies in your peer group, and we see how leading players are experiencing painful problems. Our research indicates that we think your company, your organization, your family, your whatever, may be at risk in this area as well. And we believe that if you don't address this risk, you could risk losing up to 4% of your market share within the next 6 to 12 months. Now think about this. If you refined your message so you could be this clear to your customers, if you could demonstrate the importance of what you do this clearly, how many more qualified prospects would talk to you? How much faster would they be willing to talk to you? How much easier would it be to manage the sale? When you're out there talking about yourself, talking about your features, talking about your benefits, frankly, you sound like every other salesperson out there, and you get thrown into that salesperson trap. Spend some extra time. By the way, December is a great time to do this. Spend some extra time to think about, what is it that I do that really matters? Just as I asked you a few minutes ago about a year from now, what's the single objective that you want to be able to have achieved? Think about what's the single objective, what's the most important measurement or the most important point that a customer could look to be able to gauge the success of having worked with you in the period of time that they've worked with you. Start talking about that, and you'll see your conversations change very, very quickly. Let's go to the fourth point. What's the fourth thing that great salespeople do that allows them to achieve far more with their time? They measure and track what's important. I'm using the word maniacal a lot today, but what you find is that great salespeople are maniacal about the critical few things that matter. They're maniacal about measuring and tracking. Measure and track, measure and track, measure and track. But here's the interesting thing. They don't measure and track like everybody else. I want you to think about three areas. There's the activities, all the different things that we do. There are what I refer to as efforts, more on that in a minute, but those are kind of the critical areas of focus, those things that really lead to results. And then there are results, there are outcomes. Average people measure activities and or outcomes. How many calls did I make today? How many proposals did I send out? How much business did I close? What's our gross margin this month? There's an over tendency to measure activities or outcomes. Now, the problem with measuring activities is just because you do an activity doesn't necessarily mean you're going to improve your results significantly. How many of you can get excited about achieving 2 times your results by working 2 times harder next year? Well, as we established in the very beginning of this program, we don't have the time to work 2 times harder, so that's not going to work. And the trouble with measuring results is, well, A, results are lagging indicators. They tell us what happened, not what's going to happen. And B, very often they're not influenceable. We don't directly control the outcome. Think about a football player. They don't control whether or not they win the football game. Think about a pitcher. They don't control whether or not the batter hits the ball. The great measure efforts. So what's the difference between efforts and activities? An effort leads to or causes an outcome. So it's directly related to an outcome. It plugs to the second point. It is influenceable. We can impact it with our activities, and if we impact it, it will increase the likelihood of outcomes. Greg Maddux, one of the greatest pitchers of all time, never kept track of how many hits he gave up or how many balls and strikes were called against him because he didn't control what the umpire called. Greg Maddux kept track of how many times did his foot land in the right spot and was his release point in the right place. Because he could control that. He could work on that. He could improve that. And what he knew was if he could increase the frequency of his foot landing in the right place and releasing the ball at the right time, that would increase the likelihood of a positive outcome. So an effort leads to an outcome. It's influenceable, and it's one of the critical few things. Now, I say here no more than 3 to 7 measurements. There are some businesses, some situations where getting up to the 7 makes sense. I'm going to warn you, anytime you go above 5, you risk losing focus. You risk measuring so many things that you're measuring nothing, that you're being pulled in too many different directions. What are the 3 to 5 measurements that indicate, what are the 3 to 5 activities, actions, efforts that you can influence that would increase the likelihood of you achieving your target objective? And measure that. But don't stop there. Don't just measure, track. One of the most powerful things that you can do is track your trailing 12 months. Track these critical 3 to 5 activities over the course of time of how you're doing over the last 12 months. You can spot trends and you can solve problems before they impact your end results. Use the tracking, use the measurements to guide your behaviors. We will be sending a follow-up email to all the attendees here today, offering some free downloads. One of the tools that we'll be offering to you, and if you want to email us sooner for it, you can, is a tool that would allow you to set up. We'll give you some typical indicators that salespeople will track, and it's automatically programmed to allow you to begin tracking a trailing 12 months. It does the calculations automatically. All you have to do is chart it. Start charting your 12 months, your trailing 12 months activities, your trailing 12-month effort, and you'll be able to see what are the key causes of success and what are the things that you need to stimulate. Continue to do that, and I promise you, you'll see improved results. The fifth thing, like I said, is that great salespeople understand that success is not a one-person game. It's a team effort. And they take accountability very seriously. And as such, they utilize what we refer to and what many other people refer to as an accountability buddy. Someone who's going to work with them and truly hold them accountable to their goals and to the efforts that they've promised. An accountability buddy can be a coworker, it can be an outside peer, it can be a friend, you can hire a professional coach. We do an awful lot of accountability buddy work with our clients. This has to be a person, though, who's not there to necessarily make you just feel good, though some cheerleading can certainly help. Their job is to hold you accountable to what you said matters and to what you said you're going to do. It shouldn't be your spouse or significant other. I'm not going to say it can never be your spouse and significant other, but what we find is the relationship that you have with your spouse is complicated enough, or your significant other is complicated enough. If you throw accountability work on top of it, it can really confuse and frustrate things. And we find kind of keeping those things separate has a lot of benefit. And it can't be your boss. Now, don't get me wrong, your boss is going to hold you accountable, or should, and you're certainly accountable to your boss. But your boss can't really be your accountability buddy because, well, they're your boss. If you don't have an accountability buddy, make a goal by the end of the year to have somebody that's going to work with you and you can work with them, where you will hold each other accountable to your critical few goals and your critical few efforts. And you can report your measurements to them as a way to build up that discipline. When you take these 5 efforts, when you take these 5 simple insights, what you can do is you get gravity working with you instead of gravity working against you. And that's probably the biggest challenge that I've seen over the last 4 years dealing with this deep recession, is just how much harder the gravitational pull is. And the danger is the harder gravity pulls at us, the more things we throw at ourselves to try to master. Narrow it down. Master these 5 efforts. I promise you, you'll see 2012 produce the best results you've had in years. Let's talk about another key time waster. And I want to share with you some insights. I promise this as a bonus. One of the things that's taking more and more and more time is getting through the door, getting to that decision maker, getting to that person within a company or an organization, or if you're selling to consumers, to families, that can cause things to happen. One of the reasons that it's so much more difficult to get through that door is because our customers are more overwhelmed today than they've ever been. They're doing more things than they have to do. Again, if we're not coming off right off the bat as important and critical, then it's going to be very difficult to get through to have them allocate the time that we need so that they pay attention to us. Here's what you have to do to get into the door faster. First thing is make yourself introducible. Develop some tools, write an article, work on your brochure so it tells the story that you really want to tell. Again, people buy for their reasons, not for yours. People will meet with you for their reasons, not for yours. They're not going to meet with you because you have some feature, some benefit. They're not going to meet with you just because you have some great solution. Everybody's got a great solution. People will meet with you because you can help them solve one of their problems. Make sure you're connecting to their problems. What are the 3 to 5 critical problems that you'll solve? Second thing, earn a seat at the table by creating value. If you can remember one thing about getting through the door faster, remember this: stop selling. Focus on helping. Create value. You might have to provide information. You might have to share some of your wisdom to influencers around that person before they'll let you in the door. But remember, if you think different and act different than the typical salesperson and you focus on creating value, you're going to significantly increase the likelihood of getting into the door you want to go to. Third thing is ask what we refer to as an important exclusive question. If you want to talk to the CEO, ask a question that only the CEO can answer. If you want to talk to a director or superintendent, ask a question that only a director or superintendent can answer. These are questions about their issues. These are questions about their results. These are questions about their challenges. If the office manager or the administrative assistant is keeping you away from the person that you want to talk to, don't spend all your time trying to convince them about what a wonderful thing you'll do if they just introduce you to their manager. Ask them a question that they have to go to their manager to get the right answer to. And what you'll find is that'll grease the wheels that'll help make you introducible. You do that by focusing on their result, not your process. Why is it important for them to meet with you? Ask yourself, if I were that person behind that door, what would go wrong in my world if I didn't meet with you? Stay focused on that, and you'll find getting the introduction will become far, far easier. And here's the fifth insight. Create a tool that makes you introducible. I have up on the screen an example of a tool that we use for these types of issues. We're very focused on growth. We created a tool called the Growth Barriers Diagnostic. If we're stuck below that vice president of sales or CEO level because that person's been sent out to get some information, we send them this tool. We ask them to have the CEO or the vice president of sales fill it out. We tell them that if we meet with the vice president of sales or the CEO, these are the types of things that we're going to be talking about. And what we do beyond our words, but with our deeds, is we show the person that we want to be speaking with that we're not going to waste their time, that we're truly going to create some value, and we're not going to come in and act like every other salesperson. Think different, act different, walk different, talk different, create value, and you'll find you'll be invited in the door rather than having to knock it down. So there you go. 5 insights to getting through the door faster. 5 insights to getting your year off to a fast start. At this point, I'd like to open it up to see if anyone has any questions. So if anyone has any questions, you have a prompt on the control panel that will allow you to raise your hand, or you can type in the questions area a question, and I'd be happy to answer it. Feel free to ask me a question about anything we talked about today or anything else that can relate to improving your sales year. We'll give it one more minute. Steve, you have a question, sir. I've unmuted you. Feel free to share your question. Steve, are you there? Gene.
Yes. Hi, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yes. What's your question?
Doug, are you able to share the presentation with us at the end of this webinar?
Yes, we'll be sending out an email. Like I said, it should be going out tomorrow, and that will have a download for the slides.
And I certainly like to learn more a little bit about how you position value proposition and successful points on that as well down the road.
I'll tell you what we'll be doing. I'll send you an email, and that's a whole webinar in and of itself, and we'll actually be doing a webinar on that in the first quarter of next year.
Doug, we also use, in our company, it's an MBO program where we sit down with our sales team and ask them to look at between three and five benchmarks and goals and objectives to reach through the calendar year. So I think we're doing some of these things the right way, but I do agree that the power of flow is probably a big challenge for us because everything is important.
Yep. That is the biggest challenge facing us all today, is that because everything is important, it ends up being that nothing's important. And so what I would do there is when you take a look at your 3 to 5 metrics, go with what's called a 1 in 5. So of those 3 to 5 metrics, what's the one metric that is most important? And elevate that to the top and provide disproportionate focus on moving that. That'll also help create some focus as well.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Any other questions? Well, let me thank everybody again for joining us today. Please note that if we can be of any assistance to you going forward, any way to help you make more sales, faster sales, more profit per sale, please don't hesitate to reach out. Give us a call, send us an email. Do want to let you know that in January we'll be doing a very special webinar focused on the marketing function and making marketing work, harnessing the power of marketing to really be able to leverage your sales efforts. It's a nice 1-2 punch for the material that we talked about today. So once again, let me just thank everybody for your time and your attention. It truly has been a pleasure, and please don't hesitate to reach out if we can be of assistance. All the best.